Don't do that right before we hit record. Oh my God.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. Don't. You're going to give me the giggles. God, this is episode 1 and I can't.
All right. Well, welcome
See, now you're not going to be able to do it.
No. See, we're going to back it up.
Okay.
Get back it up like a pocket truck. Welcome, everybody, to Write Out Loud. It is season 3. This is episode 1. We have arrived.
Woohoo!
Officially. And, of course, here with me, as I am Matt Cassem, here with me I have the beautiful, the amazing, the talented, the ever illustrious and glorious Christina.
Have I missed those adjectives? Nobody in my world talks about me in that way, except for maybe my dog, and he's not saying those words.
He is. You just can't hear it.
Yes.
He's
so thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome.
Yes.
It feels good to be back.
It does. It does. I've missed you, even though, you and I get together often outside of the podcast, because we're friends in real life. But
IRL,
IRL. But I have actually missed the discussions, missed, the interactions, missed, all the spontaneity of it.
Oh, of course. Like making you crack up and giggle.
Exactly. Got to get it under control.
Well, I've missed you too. And I'm glad we're back because this episode, we are going to spend some time on a topic that you brought up.
Yes.
And that really really struck a chord with you.
Yeah.
And that is imposter syndrome.
Yes.
So
it really kind of came at me in a moment. I mean, I work with writers on a daily basis, editing, and it didn't strike me. And when something is snowballing, or like all of a sudden, all of my clients at one time are experiencing the same thing, a lot of times you don't notice it until wow, another one. Wow, another one. And it was suddenly, 50% to almost all of them were coming to me, and not any of them, they weren't saying the words imposter syndrome. I have imposter syndrome. Most people don't say I have imposter syndrome. They just start talking about how they can't compare. So the best example is one of my clients, actually not in direct talking to me in the beginning, but she was reading Stephen King's latest and saying she was at turn inspired and jealous. And so I brought it up later when we did talk. And, one of the things I said to her, well, first of all, she's on her 4th book. And this was I'm totally guessing, but book 100 for Stephen King. I don't know. Sure. He does have an enormous amount. So maybe it's not 100, but however many books he has, this is that number. And so comparing her work at book number 4 to his, number 100, you just can't do that. You can't do that. Sure. That's sure. Too much of someone's experience that you're discounting, and also the experience that you've had, not acknowledging that enough. And so, we started a discussion about imposter syndrome, and I realized she was client number, whatever, to come to me with this. And so that afternoon, that evening, I was doing something innocuous. And of course, that's when everything comes to you. And I heard, literally heard the phrase in my head that imposter syndrome comes down to the thinking that you have to be someone else. And I know everybody knows that's what it means because you're comparing yourself to somebody else, and that's why you feel like an imposter. But what I'm going for here is the idea that you think you have to be somebody else in order to succeed, and that's just not the case. You only have to be yourself. Why do you can't be Stephen King on his 100th book when you're only on your 4th. You just you can't. So
Nope.
You've got to learn how to combat that thinking. And I think the rest of what we're going to talk about in this episode is going to help everybody realize that in embracing yourself, you're going to better move through imposter syndrome. So I'm not of the mind that you have to get rid of it or combat it or whatever. I think you have to move through it, because I actually think, after listening to all the clients and all of the research that I've done for this episode, I actually think it comes down to the fact that you are ready to level up. When you start comparing yourself to Stephen King and his 100th book, then I think you're ready to level your own writing up, is my point. When I started this research, I kept thinking about Billie Eilish. And Billie Eilish won the Oscar for the song from the Barbie movie. What was I made for? What was I made for?
Yeah.
And I love the song. And I loved the piece of it in the movie. That's the part you and I actually talked about this. I cried, but I think I cried because of the song in the part? No, I was crying simply because of what the character Ruth Handler was saying about, we mothers stand still so that our daughters can see how far they've come. And it just, hit me because I'm of a generation to actually see how far that movement has come. So Billie Eilish, back to Billie. And I love the song. She won the Oscar for it. I think she's a genius. I thought she was a genius before this, but this solidified it for me. And the reason being is because I found an interview that really kind of backed up everything that I was saying about, imposter syndrome being that next level, because I really think that she was feeling the imposter syndrome going into, being asked to write the song. And they really didn't give her much of an idea of what to write other than this was Barbie's heart song. And so in this interview, she starts talking about how she started writing it for Barbie. The idea of what they'd seen, like, I think it was like 30 or 40 minutes of the actual beginning of the movie, but they didn't see the rest because of what the cut wasn't finished. And, she really didn't realize until a couple days after finishing the song that she wrote the song for herself. And I want to take the direct quote from the interview. She said, 2 days later, this is me. This is my life and how I feel. And the lyrics of the song are incredible. Who am I? What am I? What's my purpose? And I think that for her, prior to this, Billie had won the Grammys. She had already won an Oscar. Prior to being asked for this one, I think she was feeling lost. She even said in a completely separate interview that, of course, I can't find now, but I know that it struck me because she said she was in a deep depression and that writing this song got her out of it. And I think it's because she actually acknowledged, this is how I'm feeling. And she was very vulnerable and authentic. And honestly, the song is written at such a soul level that most people connect to it. They connect to it in some way, and a lot of it probably because of that imposter syndrome feel. What was I made for?
Yep. I
What's
think
my
to
purpose?
some degree we've all been there. Like we've all had imposter syndrome pop up at one point or another. So it's also just very relatable.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the whole piece of the Barbie movie entirely, right? As we discussed a little bit about that movie too, that is very relatable in that sense as well. Like everybody can relate to
Yeah.
feeling kind of out of place and out of sorts and not
Well,
being
and
who they think they should be.
spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the Barbie movie yet, which I doubt a lot of people haven't, and if they haven't, they're probably not going to. But the whole point of the movie is Barbie has imposter syndrome. You
Mm-hmm.
know, she's all of a sudden not her normal feeling self. But again, I think that only emphasizes what I was saying about imposter syndrome. I think is just the precursor to that next level, to whatever it is. It's your growth, it's your own personal growth of what's my next thing, what's my Billie was, you know, and I don't know her music that well. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I'm aware of it, and I've listened to it, but I think everything prior to this song I didn't so much connect to.
Sure.
This song in particular, I, on a very, very deep level connected to, and not
Mm-hmm.
just because, oh, the Barbie movie and all that kind of stuff, but again, this song to me is very, very, very personal. And I've said
Mm-hmm.
this on the podcast time and again that we connect to one another through storytelling, through
Sure.
writing, through shared experiences. And when you infuse yourself into whatever it is you're writing, whether it's music, books, whatever, we connect to that. That's an automatic connector. So
Mm-hmm.
someone just going in and writing, oh, vampires are popular, let me write a vampire novel because that's what's popular. We're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily going to connect to that. If someone comes instead and says, I'm going to write a series about blue aliens, my ode to Ice Planet Barbarians, that I went down that rabbit hole this break. Anyway, thank you, Ruby Dixon. You connect to. You connect on a
Yeah.
different level. So I really do think that part of imposter syndrome is acknowledging that you're in a growth period. You are in a growth period and you can make that leap to the next level if you just lean into it. Number
Mm-hmm.
one. Number two, that, you're ready to go for it. You are
Yeah.
ready to write what you want to write, be who you want to be, acknowledging that, yes, Stephen King is out there, but he's got a lot more experience under his belt,
Mm-hmm.
But I think,
But imagine Stephen King even had imposter syndrome at some
oh,
point, right?
mm,
He had to have. I mean, to think about the fact
yes,
that Billie Eilish,
yeah,
a megastar
yeah,
like Billie Eilish,
genius.
had
Yep.
imposter syndrome,
Yeah.
and you can really find solace in that, right? You can think about it. It is something that happens to all of us. It's something that happens
Yeah.
to every single person on this planet at
Yeah.
some point or another. They're going to
Yeah.
feel
At
like they just do not belong
at the
or don't
very
cut it.
least, Stephen King at some point had to think to himself, he was rejected by every
Hmm.
single publisher in, 1970, whatever it was, when he was shopping Carrie. Carrie came out in 73, so it had to have been prior to that he was shopping it. Every single publisher said no. Nobody is buying horror. Yes, those were the actual words. Nobody's buying
Oh,
horror. Um, and by
look
nobody's
at me.
buying horror, they meant nobody's reading horror, which that's completely the thing is when they say stuff like that, that's because that's the only evidence that they have. They have no
Hmm.
evidence of the readers actually wanting something from Stephen King.
Sure.
He is the one that opened the door and said, hey, this is my kind of horror. What do you think? And people were
Yeah.
like, oh my God, this is so good. So
Hmm.
I think it's a matter of knowing who you are as a writer, what you want to write, and simply going for it.
100%. You have to embrace it. You have to try. And this is the hard part, because this is the part that, we're going to kind of oversimplify, right? We're going to say,
Right.
you just try to tap into your creativity, your own voice, and just create, because that is what is going to ultimately stand out. It's what's going to ring most true to everybody else, is if
Yeah.
you stay true to who you are.
Yeah. Your authenticity is going to come through in the writing. And that's, again, my argument using Billie Eilish and the song What Was I Made For? I don't think it was popularity just from the Barbie movie. Did I think being part of the Barbie movie helped? Yes, absolutely. Would she have come up with that song had she not been tasked with a song? Greta Gerwig calls her and Phineas up and says, I would like a song.
Yeah.
Had she not been tasked with that, no, I don't know that she would have come up with the song. So it is directly related, although here's my caveat, because Billie actually says, a couple days after writing it, oh my God, this is me. This is my life and how I feel. I think she had subconsciously come out of that song feeling that way. And again, I think that's because, her being so authentic and letting it all go and letting it all out on the paper, so to speak, that she pushed herself harder. Again, in this interview, she talked about the high register that she's in for this song and it being very difficult to hit the notes,
Mm-hmm.
but that she tried it so many different ways. And she actually, in the interview, does all the different ways. And she's like, none of them worked because this is what the song wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, again, the writer geek in me, um, knowing how many other writers have said, this is what the characters wanted. This
Right.
is what, Sylvia Day said it once at a conference, and it stuck with me, that writer's block is you not doing what the characters want you to do. Like you trying to go completely in a different direction, and the characters are like, nope, I'm not
Not
going
doing
to
it.
talk to you anymore. Not unless you do what I want you to do.
Yeah.
But that's exactly what she's talking about. The creativity of that particular song was only going to be that genius level had she listened to what the song wanted. And
Sure.
again, her writing that song was her working through that imposter syndrome and coming out on the other side knowing that she's made it to that. Well, okay, maybe she didn't know until she got the Oscar. And maybe even after the Oscar, she doesn't quite know. But really, it's the acknowledgement. The Oscar is the acknowledgement. Yes, you came out on the other side, and the song is genius, and you've reached that next level.
Mm-hmm.
You've reached that next
Yeah.
level.
Yeah. So let's say here we know that really everybody at some point has dealt with imposter syndrome,
Yes.
and maybe you're feeling that way now. Maybe you have imposter syndrome now because it's your writing that you're thinking about. Maybe it's something at work, whatever that might be. But what's the way that you get out of that? How do you tame that? How do you turn that around?
Well, I don't think you turn it around, and I don't think you get out of it. I think you move through it.
Hmm.
And what I mean by moving through it is break it down. So, again, using the example of my client and Stephen King, say to yourself, okay, whoever it is that you're comparing yourself to, do they have much more experience than you?
Hmm.
And if they do, like 100 books versus four, yeah, let yourself catch up. Find somebody who's on book four
Hmm.
and then compare yourself to them. And I think you'll
Or
find a
just not compare
much,
yourself at all.
or not compare
Like,
yourself at all. No, I think sometimes it is okay to say, okay, this person is at my level, because I guarantee you more than 50% of the time you are doing better than them.
mm-hmm.
More than
Sure.
50% of the time you are doing better than them. Because I do think anyone who is feeling imposter syndrome is actually somebody who is trying to be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a group of people that don't feel that and don't care. And in fact, I had one client say to me once, "Why are all these really bad writers publishing? And how come I have trouble?" And I said, "Because you care."
Yeah.
And I think some people, there is a lot of affection, and I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of flack for saying this, but I stand my ground on this. There are a lot of writers who don't feel that they need an editor, and they just throw things up there because, you know what, I want to get it out there. I want to make the quick buck and I want to go.
Yep.
And I work with people who are more like this other client who really does care and is putting the time and the work and the effort. All of my clients, every single one, um, really work hard at
Mm-hmm.
becoming a better writer. And so I think they
Sure.
do tend to be more the imposter syndrome. So acknowledge the fact that you want to be better.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have to be Stephen King right now? No.
No.
So it's more like hitting it head on, going through it, acknowledging that you want to be like Stephen King, but you're not there yet. So what can you
Well,
do to
also,
get there?
it's like that quote: "Don't be a second-rate Stephen King. Be a
Yeah.
first-rate you."
Yes,
Right? Like,
exactly.
focus on being the best you can possibly be with
Yes.
your voice and your perspective and your stories
Yes.
and your characters and your edge, and just bring all of you to it. Don't worry so much about what everybody else is doing.
Yeah.
It reminds me. So there's a quote by Steve Jobs that the quote is: "Life can be much broader once you discover one simple fact. Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that are no smarter than you, and you can change it."
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
the sooner that you really take that to heart and understand that that's so true, literally everything
Yeah.
has been designed by other people, and they really, really aren't smarter than you.
No.
And you can do really everything they've done and more. So
Yeah.
embrace it.
It's the courage to actually try.
Hmm.
The courage to actually try. So, maybe that's the ultimate thing with imposter syndrome, is acknowledging it,
Hmm.
but still maintaining your courage
Hmm.
to try to be better. Try not to compare yourself to someone who's been out there writing for, 50 years.
Yeah.
50 years, Stephen King. So maybe if he doesn't have 100 books, he's been writing for 50 years.
Yeah.
And I know that this client is not even 50 years old. So,
Hmm.
there you go. You are trying to compare yourself to someone that you can't. There's no
Yep.
comparison. So, yeah, it comes down to the courage to try.
Hmm.
The courage
It's like any
to
other
try.
skill. You learn one new aspect or learn one new thing about it and put that into practice every single day, and you'll be fine. It'll all
Yeah.
work out and it'll all come out in the wash.
Yeah. Yeah. Imposter syndrome comes down to thinking that you have to be somebody you're not. You only have to be you.
Hmm.
And all you have to do is have the courage to try to reach that next level. Because I really do think this is obviously a theory, but I've got theories up my sleeve like you wouldn't believe. It's the theory that you are on the precipice of that next level. And that's why you get that feeling of imposter, because you're ready. It's like the universe is saying to you, to my client, you're going to be like Stephen King. You
Hmm.
are. You just have to get to, your 50 years of writing, your 50th, 100th, whatever book Stephen King is on. Just
Yeah.
keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going.
So maybe it's even an exercise of visualize yourself at that point, that 50 years down the
Yeah.
road, and doing it for 50 years. What do you see? What
Yeah.
do you what have you noticed about yourself at that point.
Yeah.
What are you doing that's different than today? What are you doing? What have you accomplished? Like, just make a list, write it all out, draw it out, however you
Yeah.
want to do it. But think about yourself at that level and
have the courage to follow through.
Make it so.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, imposter syndrome. I think we've put a fine little point on that one. It is normal. It's natural. It's
something everybody has it at one time or another.
Don't beat yourself up too badly about it. If it's something that's, if it's something you're dealing with right now, it's absolutely just something you're getting through. And hopefully we gave you a little bit of a tip or a tool.
Yeah, a jump start on how to deal with it.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, that does it for this episode, and look forward to hearing from you again next week. Share some more wisdom and, maybe some more stories too. Who knows?
Of course.
Awesome. All right, to my darling, thank you. Thank you for listening. Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, thanks so much for listening to the podcast. We really hope that you're enjoying every bit of it, but we would love to hear your feedback. Drop us an email either to matt@writeoutloudpod.com or Christina@bookmatchmaker.com. We would love to hear your thoughts. What's working, what's not working, and what do you want to hear more of? Thanks so much. We really appreciate it.